They say forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I say it's the last lie people tell themselves before they choke on regret. I learned that in Augusta, Georgia, not from a sermon or a therapist, but from the way my stepmother's hand trembled when she opened the scrapbook I gave her for Mother's Day. Now, before you think this is one of those sappy redemption arcs, let me stop you. This wasn't a story about healing. This was a reckoning, long overdue. A scrapbook, yes, but not the sentimental kind. No pressed flowers, no baby photos. Just pages and pages of neatly printed financial statements, time-stamped emails, and notarized affidavits. Evidence. My gift to her was the truth, curated, bound, and undeniable. The twist. My mother knew. She knew everything before she died. That's what gutted me the most. She died not just with cancer eating at her body, but betrayal gnawing at her soul. And still, she left me with a plan. A folder tucked away in her piano bench, of all places, with a note in her shaky handwriting that read, "For when you're ready to see it all." I wasn't ready. Not for a long time. But I became ready the day I saw my father and stepmother laughing over lunch in downtown Augusta, acting like they hadn't drained my mother's trust fund dry before she was even buried. I was 46 at the time, running what was left of the family business, or what I thought was left. My father and she had been funneling money from the company accounts for years. Travel expenses, consulting fees, shell companies. They were clever, but not clever enough. The scrapbook? That was just the beginning. You know what's cruel? My mother knew what was happening, and instead of exploding or confronting them outright, she played the long game. Quiet, watchful, deliberate. That's how I know I got my patience from her, not my father, who never met a lie he couldn't dress up in a smile. It was 2 weeks after the funeral when I found the envelope. I remember it clearly because I had gone to her house one last time, mostly to retrieve a few personal items. I wasn't even thinking straight. My grief back then was like walking through thick fog with bare feet, numb and endless. I lifted the lid of her piano bench just to touch the keys, to hear a sound she once loved. And there it was, a manila folder, aged at the corners, like it had been waiting. Inside, copies of bank statements, a list of usernames and passwords, a series of post-it notes with dates and short descriptions, unauthorized withdrawal, meeting at 12:14 p.m., overheard mention of Kian Fund. And at the back, a note, don't trust them. Take the business when you're ready. I didn't know what the hell the Kian Fund was, but I recognized the handwriting. That shaky, precise script I used to see on lunchbox notes in middle school. The kind that always ended with a heart. There was no heart this time. Just cold, hard information. I didn't act right away. That's what surprises people. They think betrayal pushes you into rage. But no, it hardens you. And hard things move slow. I spent the next 2 years learning the books, tracking every transaction, cross-referencing account names. I didn't tell anyone. Not my wife. Not even my therapist. Especially not my father. In Augusta, people like my stepmother wear generosity like perfume, strong enough to cover the rot, but never quite hiding it. She volunteered at the art museum, hosted benefit dinners for causes she couldn't pronounce. Meanwhile, she and my father were quietly gutting the legacy my mother spent her life building. So I built my case one spreadsheet at a time. The business had been bleeding for years, but they kept it alive just enough to keep up appearances. That's the thing about family businesses. They don't die fast. They rot slowly from the inside, while everyone's too polite to say anything. My father still walked into the office in his golf polos like he was doing something important, while my stepmother played the gracious partner at board meetings she barely understood. What they didn't realize was that I'd quietly become indispensable. I didn't fight them for control. I just kept showing up, early, consistent, forgettable. They thought I was tired, maybe even checked out. I let them think that. Meanwhile, I rewrote the software that tracked our operations. I put quiet flags in the accounting system. Any transaction that exceeded a certain threshold pinged me directly. I watched them steal in real time. That was when I found the Kian account. Not a fund, an actual offshore holding linked to a shell company registered under an alias that belonged to my stepmother's college roommate. Sloppy. Desperate. I traced the money back to 4 different transfers labeled equipment maintenance, but we hadn't bought a single new piece of machinery in 3 years. So I copied everything. Not just for myself, for the IRS, the state, and for a very specific lawyer my mother had referenced in her note. A man who used to be her client, back when she handled estate planning for the city's less glittery elite. When I walked into his office and dropped the files on his desk, he didn't say a word. Just opened the folder, flipped through a few pages, and nodded slowly. Then he asked if I was ready to go all the way. And I was. The next step was Mother's Day. I invited them over under the guise of brunch. Bought the fancy pastries from that bakery on Broad Street. My stepmother always pretended to love. Set the table just so, printed name cards, even used my mother's china. It wasn't about kindness. It was about staging. If I was going to burn it down, I wanted it to look like a celebration. I gave her the scrapbook with a smile. She opened it right there in front of my father, and I watched her face drain of color. She flipped through each page like she was hoping the next one would magically erase the last. My father just stared at me, confused. I didn't say much. Just one line. Cooperation or prison. Your choice. You ever watch someone realize they've lost control of a room? It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like the power flickering before an outage. That's what my father looked like when he reached the third page of that scrapbook. Not angry. Not scared. Just flickered. The first page was enough to shake her. The third was where it became undeniable. They weren't just caught, they were cornered. And me? I just sipped my coffee like I wasn't watching my parents' marriage dissolve in real time across my mother's heirloom table. What followed wasn't a breakdown. It was logistics. Cold, tight, suffocating logistics. The accountant who signed off on the Kian transfers had been paid off. I confirmed it through email metadata my mother somehow preserved on an old thumb drive, a relic that she hid inside a tea tin marked Jasmine in the garage. That was her style. Pretty on the outside, ruthless on the inside. Turns out the audit from 3 years ago never happened. They'd fabricated the paperwork. The year we all thought the business had stabilized, it was just a lie on top of another lie, wrapped in a spreadsheet. When I brought that to the lawyer, his reaction was the closest thing I'd seen to anger in a man like him. Calm, composed, eternally beige. He told me flat out that if I filed what we had, the feds would come knocking. But then he paused, stared at me for a long moment, and asked a question that's haunted me since. Do you want them punished, or do you want to win? I didn't answer at first, because I didn't know. I told myself this was about justice. But standing on the edge of it, I wasn't so sure. Revenge, justice, victory, they all start to look the same when you've been walking around with betrayal welded to your spine for years. So I took a walk through the historic district that afternoon. Mossy oaks, cracked sidewalks, all that southern charm meant to make you forget how much people hide behind tradition. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted to make them irrelevant. I wanted to take the one thing they thought they owned, control, and walk away with in my pocket. That's when I decided, no courtrooms, no handcuffs, just terms. I'd take the business. They'd sign over their shares, walk away, and in exchange, I'd bury the evidence. I called it a conversation, but it was really a surrender ceremony. We met at that little office near the Savannah River, the one that used to be my mother's. She had designed it to feel warm, soft chairs, a jar of peppermint sticks on the desk, family pictures on the bookshelf. It felt like a lie now, a stage set that fooled everyone, including me. My father looked smaller in that space than I remembered. His shoulders hunched, skin looser. He hadn't aged well. Guilt, or maybe the bourbon. My stepmother came in like it was a charity event, all perfume and pearls, still clinging to the last shreds of her image. She sat stiffly, looked around like she expected applause. I gave him the offer. They'd sign over their shares, their voting rights, and every access key they'd ever had to the business. In return, the scrapbook and the hard drive behind it would be destroyed. Quietly. No police. No bankruptcy. Just gone. A clean break that kept their reputations intact, at least to those who still believed they had any. My father didn't argue. He just nodded. Maybe he was relieved. Maybe he knew it was over long before this meeting ever happened. My stepmother? She tried to posture. Asked what would stop me from turning around and reporting everything anyway. I just told her one thing. Trust has to start somewhere. She didn't like that answer. But she signed. It was done in under 20 minutes. 17 years of manipulation, undone by a single signature and a zip file on a flash drive. I walked out of that office with a new title and a new silence. And you know what? It didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in the ruins of something that should have been sacred. I didn't celebrate, didn't call anyone. I drove home in the dark, windows down, letting the Georgia air sting my face. It felt like penance. The next morning, I changed the company locks. Running the company without them should have felt cleaner. It didn't. Every corner of that office echoed with their presence. My father's monogrammed whiskey decanter still sat in the top drawer of the filing cabinet. My stepmother's inspirational quote plaques lined the hallway walls. Little framed lies about integrity and excellence. I didn't throw them out. Not at first. It felt too easy, like rewriting history. I left it all where it was like setting bones back in place after fracture. Let hurt a while. The staff noticed the change immediately. Not just the new security protocols or the missing names on the company's site. It was the silence. No more gossip behind closed doors. No more surprise consultant fees or bonus checks showing up in strange departments. One of the accountants, a sharp young guy named Ethan, knocked on my door after week 1 and said, half joking, that it felt like the place had been exorcised. He wasn't wrong. We were running a business of ghosts. There were still fires to put out. Vendors who hadn't been paid. Lawsuits quietly brewing from shady deals they'd made without board approval. My inbox was a graveyard of things swept under the rug. And every time I uncovered something new, I'd go back to that scrapbook. Not to the evidence. I'd already wiped the files, but to the act of giving it to her. The look on her face. That mix of rage, shame, and disbelief. It replayed in my mind like a favorite scene from a film I never wanted to watch again. And yet, I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of fixing what other people broke. That's when I got the letter, postmarked from a P.O. box in Charleston. No return address. Just a card. Inside was a photo of my mother at her law school graduation. On the back, one sentence written in familiar, looping cursive. You did good. I knew you would. I stared at that card for a long time, trying to decide if it made me feel proud or hollow. Maybe both, because what it told me, more than anything, was that she knew how far it might have to go. That she'd seen something in me, or in them, that said, one day, all this would fall. I never told anyone about the card. I locked it in the desk drawer where I used to keep my father's keys. Let it sit beside the spare company seal and the hard copy of the contract they signed when they gave everything up. Proof of victory or of loss, depending on how you looked at it. Around that time, my wife started asking if I was okay again. She never pushed too hard, just those quiet check-ins. I'd give her a tired smile and say I was just adjusting. She'd nod, hand on my shoulder, and tell me she was proud of me. I didn't feel proud. I felt displaced, like I had stepped into someone else's life. A man with a title, an office, and a calm reputation, but who woke up some nights half believing he could still hear the whispering voices from the hallway outside his childhood bedroom. Accusation. Secrets. That eerie silence after a fight, where no one says sorry because they don't believe they're wrong. That's what the business felt like now. Haunted. Not by ghosts, but by patterns. Then came the surprise audit. Not mine, theirs. Apparently, someone at the state level flagged one of the same shell accounts I had buried. I hadn't filed it, but someone did. Quietly. Without telling me. My first instinct was paranoia. Did they double-cross me after all? But the more I dug, the more I realized what had happened. One of the junior partners had stumbled across the records while cleaning old files and submitted them anonymously. The timing couldn't have been worse. Or maybe it was perfect, because that's when my stepmother showed up again. Not in person, in the form of a subpoena. The envelope came on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by someone who didn't smile and didn't speak, just handed me the papers and walked away like they'd just finished mowing the lawn. I stood in the doorway, holding that thick off-white envelope, heart oddly calm. Inside, a subpoena for records related to the Kian account, dated transactions, and, this part made my jaw clench, a list of potential witnesses, including me. And her, my stepmother. She was being investigated for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Turns out, not all the money made it through the laundering funnel. Some of it was still traceable, sloppy entries, maybe a moment of arrogance. She thought she'd gotten away with it. But money always leaves footprints, especially when you've got a ghost walking behind you with a flashlight. I met with my attorney the next day. Same office, same worn leather chairs. He was already reading through the paperwork when I walked in. He didn't say anything right away, just gave me that look, the kind that says, "You ready to do this all over again?" I nodded, and then I did something I hadn't planned. I asked if I had to testify. Not because I didn't want to. I've been waiting years for something like this, but because suddenly the idea of watching her squirm under oath didn't feel satisfying. It felt heavy. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "You okay with letting her walk?" I shook my head. I just don't want to be the one who pushes her off the ledge. If she jumps, fine, but I'm not putting my hands on her back. He nodded like he understood. Then he said something I'll never forget. That's the difference between revenge and closure. So we complied. I handed over what they asked for. Nothing extra. No color commentary. Just the facts. Weeks passed. She didn't show up to the first hearing. Claimed illness. Her lawyer tried to delay, to deflect. My father, interestingly, wasn't on the list. He'd signed over everything, walked away, and in doing so, stepped right out of the blast zone. But she kept a copy of the Kian keys. Probably couldn't help herself. That was her fatal flaw. Not greed, not even betrayal. It was believing she was smarter than the truth. I heard through a former employee, one of those quiet lifers who never really leaves, even after retirement, that my stepmother was trying to sell the house. Not the one she and my father bought after the scandal. The original one. My mother's house. Technically, it had been part of the business asset shell game. She kept control of it longer than I expected, probably thought it was her prize for surviving the whole ordeal. But once the audit launched, the liens came down fast. State-level financial reviews tend to move like molasses until they don't. Then it's like watching a dam crack wide open. She listed it quietly. No sign in the yard. No open house. Just a desperate little posting online, tucked between overpriced lake cabins and abandoned foreclosures. The pictures looked exactly as I remembered it. The big bay window where Mom used to sit in the mornings with her coffee. The creaky stairs she refused to fix because squeaky floors mean you're never alone. It should have hurt. It didn't. I drove by one morning before work, parked across the street, and just watched for a while. The lawn had gone to seed. A dead hydrangea bush sagged against the porch railing. It looked hollow. Not haunted, just abandoned. She'd moved out already, apparently. Maybe to Charleston, maybe to nowhere. The state was still digging. Her accounts frozen. Her cards revoked. Reputation in shambles. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like someone who'd walked a circle for years, only to arrive at the same front steps with no one waiting on the other side. That house never belonged to her. It didn't belong to me either. Not anymore. I stayed in the car for nearly 20 minutes, engine off, windows up. Then I turned the key and left without getting out. It came late. After dinner, after the dishes, after the house had gone quiet. I was reading a report on supplier shifts when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I don't answer those. Too many years of ducking cold calls and debt collectors on the company's behalf. But something told me to pick up. It was my father. His voice was softer than I remembered. Not just older, deflated. Like someone had cut the rope holding him upright. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't apologize either. Just said he heard about the audit and asked, flatly, if she was going to jail. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know him anything. But I told him what I knew. The charges were pending, the investigation still active, and unless she found a miracle lawyer or someone to pin it on, it wasn't looking good. There was a pause. A long one. Then he said something I'll never forget. She used me. It didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like a man just now realizing the obvious. Too late to fix, too heavy to carry. I didn't tell him I'd known that for years. I didn't say she used him to get to me, to access my mother's estate, to funnel money through the business. I didn't say any of the things that might have satisfied my pride. I just said, yeah, she did. He asked if I'd let him visit the office sometime. Not for anything official. He just wanted to see it. I said I'd think about it. We hung up not with goodbyes, but with silence. That's when I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. I had every right to be. He stood by, looked the other way, let the woman he claimed to love manipulate the life out of everyone around her. But the man on that call wasn't the same one who used to smirk across boardroom tables. He was hollow now. The cost of cowardice finally paid in full. Some debts don't come with due dates. They just arrive. It's funny what you keep. The scrapbook, the one I gave her, I never destroyed it. I told them I would. Told the lawyer. Told the accountant. Told myself. But it's still here, in a locked drawer beneath my desk at the office. I don't open it often. Maybe once a year, around Mother's Day. It's not about the evidence anymore. I don't need it. Legally, morally, emotionally, that chapter is closed. But I keep it because it reminds me of how precise my mother was. How she knew what I would need, even if I didn't yet know it myself. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't leave a letter dripping in sentiment. She left files, patterns, a trail I could follow. Some people leave behind poems. My mother left breadcrumbs to the truth. Augusta has changed over the years. The bakery closed. The law firm she built from scratch got absorbed into some faceless national firm. The piano bench, though, that I kept, it sits in the corner of my home office now, unopened. I haven't touched the keys since the day I found her note. Not because I'm afraid. Just because that sound belongs to a world that doesn't exist anymore. I used to think revenge would feel like fire. Hot. Immediate, consuming. But it doesn't. It feels like ash. Quiet. Settled. Heavy, but not burning. And after all the signatures, subpoenas, late-night audits, and stiff bourbon-filled silences, I'm left with this. A business that runs clean. A name that still matters. And a silence I've finally earned. So on Mother's Day now, I don't visit a grave. I don't send flowers or write a tribute online. I unlock the drawer. I take out the scrapbook. And I remember the woman who taught me that love, when it's real, doesn't always look like comfort. Sometimes it looks like a plan.